Hi everyone, and welcome to week 14 of our course. This week we will focus on self-reflection and self-care in the profession. After you read the material and view any videos in this module, you should be able to identify the benefits of self-reflection and self-care on teaching, learning, and classroom management, discuss techniques for self-reflection and self-care, and determine who will be involved in engaging in self-reflection. There are 3 short readings that you should focus on this week, including Thompson, pages 15 to 25, Kerwin, 2013, and Craig, 2016. These are all on Blackboard. If you have time, you might consider checking out Cutler 2016 and the other extra resources in the folder for this week. There's also 2 videos embedded within the presentation. One is how to engage your colleagues through learning walks, structured observation. It's about 5 minutes long. And the other comes from Real Rap with Reynolds and asks, what if you suck as a teacher? That's a little bit longer, but it's worth the watch. I do want to remind you again, this might be the last time, that there are notes sheets to help you keep track of your ideas and your thinking for setting up various pages on your classroom management plan. So I strongly encourage you to pull these sheets. Think about the questions as they relate to the readings and the materials for each week. So before you read, think about the following questions. Why is it important to be a reflective practitioner? Whose voices will count throughout this process for you? So for example, yourself, your administration, colleagues, students, parents, can you think of anyone else? And then finally, what will this process look like for you? How are you going to engage in this really important work? So now please read Thompson, pages 15 to 25, and then continue to review the PowerPoint. The focus of this week was self-reflection and self-care. Thompson offered some strong ideas for engaging in both, but I wanted to share an operating definition that you might also find useful. This definition comes from Janelle Cox, who states, self-reflection is a simple way to dig deeper into your feelings and find out why you were doing something or feeling a certain way. With a profession as challenging as teaching, self-reflection offers teachers an opportunity to think about what works and what doesn't in their classroom. We teachers can use reflective teaching as a way to analyze and evaluate our own practices so we can focus on what works. If you click on the link on this slide, you can see a larger piece that Cox wrote on self-reflection and some ways that she engages in the process. There might be some important ideas there for you as you work to develop your own system and process for your classroom management plan. The remaining slides don't necessarily come from the Thompson text, but there are additional ideas to support your learning. Who can and or should be involved in the process of reflection and improvement? It's an important question to consider as there are always different stakeholders you can draw from who will help you improve your teaching. The first person you should consider is you. How will you know what you are doing works for the learners, but also works for you as well? What does this process look like for you? Think about how Janelle Cox organized her process on the previous slide, if you were to click on the link and look through those materials. You can and should also consider the students that you serve. After all, they're receiving instruction and engaging in the process, so it's really important that you do elicit their reactions to your teaching. You can also draw from colleagues or administrators, Most new teachers will be observed by administrators, but this process will vary from site to site. You should also consider how you might engage your colleagues in the process too. One of the videos in the presentation will show one way this can be taken up. Another key stakeholder is the family or families of the students you serve. Remember, we use the term family from an inclusive perspective, meaning this might be the birth parents, step parents, adoptive parents, foster parents, maybe older brothers or sisters or aunts or uncles, any family who's responsible for the student, or even friends who serve as family, and so on. Their opinions on what's happening in the classroom also matter, so do consider how you might elicit their feedback. So I also wanted to share this slide as one example of a way you might engage personally in self-reflection. So you might consider some or all of these questions. There's a link to another resource from where these questions were adapted from. So I'm not going to read these to you. These are just some examples of questions you might ask, but you can think of others as well. This slide includes ways to elicit information from colleagues, particularly in using different kinds of learning walks to learn from and with colleagues. As you watch this video, consider how might seeing colleagues engage in teaching contribute to self-reflection practice, and what might be the benefits of this approach. After reading Thompson and then viewing those additional slides, what are some ideas that you have for engaging in self-reflection? What about learning from colleagues? What connections did you make to your classroom management plan? Now, please read Kerwin 2013 and then continue to review the PowerPoint. Here's another resource to help you think through why we engage in self-reflection. Real Rap with Reynolds shares a vlog called What If You Suck as a Teacher, and gives some sound advice on the importance of self-reflection and moving forward. Also, take a moment to read through Don't Quit, found on this slide. Here is your classroom management plan connection. From the directions for this page, reflect on how you will evaluate your ability to teach and engage learners. As you continue to develop your classroom management plan, please remember things to consider for this page. You're going to need to design a feedback process for evaluating your own instructional practices. So to do that, you need to think about the following. How will you find out what's going well and what needs to be refined or changed in your classroom? Whose opinion and feedback do you value? Is it students, families, colleagues, administrators? And then, what will you do with the information once you have it? From there, you need to create forms, documents, resources, or any other kinds of materials that you will use to collect that information. And then finally, you're going to describe the different feedback forms and processes that you're going to implement in your classroom. So if you've already created them, include them. So link to them. Again, make sure if you're linking to a Google Doc that you're sharing it properly. But if you look at the rubric, you need to include a certain number of forms or documents, and you need to reflect on those forms and documents as well. All right, now please read Craig 2016 for information on the importance of self-care. Craig describes the emotional work of teaching, which is really a pillar of the profession that's often unnoticed and undervalued. I wanted to pull a key quote from the reading, as this is something that I have experienced myself as a teacher, and also something I've observed many of my interns go through as well. Compassion fatigue, or secondary trauma, is characterized by feelings of incompetence and emotional exhaustion. Teachers experiencing it have difficulty maintaining the level of emotional detachment needed to manage one's feelings toward children whose behavior is frequently out of control. Craig does go on to identify some important principled practices to help you and your students. Create safe environments that are routine-oriented and predictable, which we have certainly talked about in this course. Draw from a mindset of intentionality. Everything should be done with a purpose. We've talked a lot about that as well in this course. And then finally, be optimistic towards your learners. Create opportunities for students to be positive with each other. Some of the other practices we discussed, like restorative practices and building positive relationships and community building, can contribute to this. So we've given you the tools here. It's just one course. You haven't had a chance to practice it maybe as much as would make you fluent in any of these things. But even as you are into your second and third years of teaching, it's really worth coming back to these ideas because of course, you can't hold everything in your brain all at once. So again, these ideas will serve you throughout your career. If you can't implement them immediately, it's important that you continue to look back to them. This slide contains a few additional resources for you as you engage in self-care, which is critical and difficult to do in this profession. The first resource is called 5 Important Strategies for Self-Care by John Harper, who essentially says to trim your to-do list, allow yourself to stop, embrace vulnerability, reach out to experts, and to pass your umbrella. So you can read what he means by each of these in further detail in the brief article attached. There's also a bonus resource called Why Teacher Self-Care Matters and How to Practice Self-Care in Your School. And this has a lot of other important recommendations. So again, both of these are hyperlinked here. And you can also find them on Blackboard. So every semester, I ask all students to provide in-depth comments and feedback for the assignments, the information, and the materials they've interacted with over the course of the semester through a chalk talk activity and debrief. So I ask students questions on the assignments and materials that worked well, in addition to assignments and materials that did not work well, and to also offer suggestions for improvement. So this is one of the ways I engage in self-reflection on my ability of instruction. So depending on the feedback, if these are large level changes, like course level changes, all the instructors kind of like at the end of the semester, we get together, we talk about the feedback we've gotten from students, and we make adjustments to the course and how the assignments are, maybe when they come up, or whether we shorten an assignment or provide more directions or instructions for an assignment. So those are kind of like some larger level things. And then some of the feedback is kind of more personal, like, oh, how did I facilitate this, or what kind of things did I do with the discussion board that might be different. So on a more individual, I consider that on my own and I make changes accordingly. So this semester, we are not in person, so we can't do a traditional chalk talk activity. However, we can still engage in this process through the discussion board. So when you get to Blackboard this week and the discussion board opens, you will see some prompts that ask you to provide pretty specific feedback on the course. So please be honest. I really do want your honest feedback, and I use that feedback to make future changes. So this is the prompt you'll see on the discussion board. It's going to ask you to identify 1 or 2 assignments from these 4 that you found useful, and then give some examples or describe why you found them useful. And then likewise, it's going to ask you to identify 1 or 2 assignments from that same list that were difficult or challenging, and again, why. So in addition to that, what suggestions would you give to improve the quality of the assignment or assignments? So again, be mindful that we really do use these ideas for course revisions. So be clear and specific. So the more specific you can be, the more helpful you are to us as far as thinking about what to do and how to move forward in future semesters. All right, we're winding it down now. Assignment prep. We have a discussion board. So as always, post to the discussion board by Thursday, your initial post, Thursday by midnight, and then your responses to your classmates are due Sunday by midnight. And as far as your classroom management plan, continue to make progress on the classroom management plan. If you look at the pacing guide, it is asking you to review the requirements for the evaluation of ability page in the classroom management plan assignment and use the evaluation of ability notes page form in Blackboard to guide you. So design a process for being a reflective practitioner. State whose opinions you will seek, and then show how you're going to accomplish that. And that is going to be by creating some ways to collect that information. It might be a Google form. It might be a survey that is just on paper. It could be something else. So you do need to look at the rubric to determine how many of these artifacts you need to include. And again, make sure anything you link out to, if it is in the Google Drive, that you change the sharing settings so anyone can view it.